Hey there, fellow culinarians and Epicureans. We are rolling in the dough today, and you're going to have a chance to rise to the occasion because today is all about basic lean dough. If you've ever had French bread or hard rolls, you've had basic lean dough. Once this dough is baked, it becomes this wonderful, tasty morsel of a bread that can only be described as having a moist, chewy inside texture along with a crispy crust. Basic lean dough is made with just a few basic ingredients that include water, flour, yeast, salt, sugar, and oil. Today we're using the straight dough method in order to create these wonderful tasty treats. Before we go to step one, the first thing you want to do is mise en place all of your ingredients and have all your utensils in place. So when you start mise en placing your ingredients for the recipe, the last thing you want to measure out is the water. The water has to be a certain temperature. Today, it's got to be between 95 and 115 degrees. That's because we need the water to activate the yeast. Remember, the yeast is our organic leavener here. And yeast is a microscopic fungi or fungus that we're going to bring back to life by rehydrating it with some warm water and a little sugar for food. And our yeast is our leavener. Remember, leaveners make our baked goods rise. If our water is too cold, it won't activate the yeast. If our water is too hot, it's going to kill the yeast. Our first ingredient, you can either measure out 1 tablespoon of oil or melted butter. Today, I'm going to use oil. And oil is going to give us some tenderness, some moisture, and flavor. Our second ingredient, 1.5 teaspoons of yeast, our leavener. Yeast is going to bring us some flavor, but more importantly, we want the rise. Next, we're going to measure out 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. Sugar, of course, is going to bring us some flavor, but the sugar is also going to act as a food for our yeast, because once our yeast gets going and it starts rehydrating, it's going to give us carbon dioxide, which is going to make things rise. Our next ingredient is all-purpose flour, and we need 2 cups of it. Make sure you level off those measuring cups because this is an exact science when it comes to making breads. Next, we need 1 teaspoon of salt for flavor, and believe it or not, the salt is going to keep the yeast from rising too much. Now we're just about ready to measure out our last ingredient, which is going to be water. And remember, it's got to be between 95 and 115 degrees when we put together that yeast, oil, and sugar. But before you do that, make sure you have a few supplies at hand. You're going to need a wooden spoon, a bench knife, 3 clean, medium stainless steel bowls. Oh, and I almost forgot, a half sheet tray lined with parchment paper. Now for our last ingredient, water. Again, I cannot say this enough. It's got to be between 95 and 115 degrees. If it's below 95, the yeast won't activate, and if it's above 115, it'll kill the yeast. So make sure by the time that water hits your stainless steel bowl, it's still between 115 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. We've got our water all measured out. We're pouring it into the stainless steel bowl, and I'm going to take and sprinkle the yeast and the sugar and put the oil in with the water. I'm going to let this set for 5 minutes to allow the yeast to rehydrate and get some of that CO2 or carbon dioxide going. Once that's set for 5 minutes, it's time to add the flour and the salt. Here's where your wooden spoon comes in handy. I would take the wooden spoon and start incorporating the flour sugar into the liquids, and just so it comes together and makes somewhat of a ball, I would start using my hands to start kneading the mixture and pulling it together. Now you want to make sure you add a little extra flour if it's too moist and it's sticking to your hands. You're going to want to mix this for about 8 to 10 minutes. It's called kneading. And we want to start working the gluten. And this is going to give texture to our bread. 8 to 10 minutes. Work, knead, work, knead. Keep working it. Now that I've kneaded it for 8 to 10 minutes, I'm going to move that dough to a clean stainless steel bowl sprayed with a little cooking spray. I'm going to cover it with a clean kitchen towel, and I'm going to place it in a proof box at about 85 to 90 degrees. We're going to allow that to proof for about a half hour or until it doubles in size. Now that it's doubled in size, you want to pull the dough out of the proof box. You want to roll the dough out on your workbench, and you want to punch it down just a little bit to deflate the dough. I'm going to let this rest on the bench for about 5 minutes. Then the next thing we need to do is scale out our bread. What we're going to do today is scale out 4 2-ounce portions, 2 of which are going to be hard rolls, and the other 2 are going to be a single knot. And then lastly, we're going to portion out or scale out an 8-inch piece of dough, and we're going to make that into a baguette. After shaping the rolls and the baguette, we're going to put them on our hash sheet tray lined with parchment paper. Once we have our dough trayed up, we're going to put it back into the proof box until it doubles in size again. Once that is complete, we're going to pull it out, and I'm going to do a little something different here. I'm going to make a little bit of an egg wash. We're going to take a little milk and a little egg. I'm going to whisk it up, and I'm going to use a pastry brush, and I'm going to lightly brush the top of our hard rolls and our single knots and our baguette. This is going to give us a shiny look, a little bit of color, and of course, a little bit of flavor. Finally, it's ready for a 400-degree oven, and we want to bake it for 15 to 20 minutes. Or until golden brown. At last, some wonderful, basic lean dough fresh out of the oven. Only if this could be smell-o-vision. But soon, you're going to find out what it smells like yourself.